Now it's time to look at some practical ways of adjusting the diet to balance those glucose levels. I've included 13 hacks in total, and we'll take our time sorting through these so you're clear on which strategies you want to use in the week ahead. A hack is a type of shortcut solution to a problem or a workaround. These hacks should be enough to stabilize your blood sugar levels when combined with a whole foods, plant-based diet. As we go through and learn the various hacks, I want you to write down your top 3. Which of these strategies stand out to you as being the most realistic and appealing to help you balance your blood sugars? If you remember last week, we covered hack number 1. This is where I asked you to add greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds to your diet on a daily basis. I hope you have taken the time to incorporate these foods into your daily diet. And now we're going to move on to the rest of the hacks. Hack number 2 for effectively reducing blood sugar spikes. Fiber is your new best friend. Are you ready for a disturbing statistic? Only 5% of Americans meet the recommended daily amount of fiber intake, which is 25 milligrams a day. 5%! That means 95% of us are walking around without consuming adequate fiber on a daily basis. The U.S. government calls fiber a nutrient of public health concern. Do you remember the chart of the standard American diet? 55% of calories in the standard American diet are in the form of processed foods. Those are foods where the fiber has often been removed and discarded so that only the calorie-dense portion of the food remains. Well, the problem with that is that when you remove the fiber from the diet, you not only contribute to increased chances of various cancers like colorectal cancer, but you also increase the glycemic index of the foods. When you consume fiber-rich foods, that fiber acts as a type of mesh in your stomach, which slows the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream. And this is actually great news because that means it reduces that blood glucose spike after you eat. Fiber feeds the good bacteria in your gut, making sure that your immune system stays healthy and ensuring that you continue to produce vitamins that you need for proper digestion and metabolism. It also has the added benefit of lowering cholesterol levels. Remember that plants are the only food source of fiber. Fiber is important because it provides the resistance our bodies need to strengthen the intestinal muscles and sensitize the nerve endings in that part of the body. Just like we get bigger muscles by working out, we also increase the strength of our GI tract by working it out. And we do that by consuming coarse plant fibers, mostly from vegetable sources. Are dried fruits a good source of fiber? Well, they are in fact a dense source of fiber, but they aren't the ideal source, and let me tell you why. First of all, let me explain what dried fruits are, for those of you who may not be familiar with them. Dried fruits are fruits where most of the water content has been removed either naturally through sun drying or by other means like using specialized dryers and dehydrators. Some of the most common dried fruits include apricots, dates, mangoes, cherries, figs, peaches, prunes, and raisins. Dried fruits must be eaten in small portions. Eating them in large quantities can have adverse effects on the body. Too many dried fruits can cause flatulence, bloating, abdominal cramps, constipation, and sometimes diarrhea. Dried fruits usually don't fill the stomach quickly. Therefore, most often there's a tendency to overeat them. And although dried fruits have a low glycemic index, they are rich in fruit sugars that are mostly in the form of fructose. High fructose intake may lead to obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. In other words, dried fruits have a lot of concentrated fructose, and that is bad for your overall health. On top of the heavy fructose load, some manufacturers add preservatives to the dried fruits called sulfites. These preservatives make them look more appealing and can prevent discoloration. These are most often used in brightly colored fruits like apricots and raisins. Some people are allergic to sulfites, especially those who are prone to asthma and may experience asthma attacks after eating them, so be sure to check the label and make sure that there are not added sulfites for preservation. At times, improperly stored dried fruits may be contaminated by fungi. This can cause health conditions like allergic reactions, respiratory problems, diarrhea, stomachache, nausea, and vomiting. So the moral of the story here is think of dried fruits as a form of candy. You really want to eat them in minimal quantities and don't rely on them as a source of fiber. Hack number 3, mind your grains. This hack is all about paying attention to the overall quality of the grains that we consume. Grains are, in fact, not the most nutrient-dense food group in the diet. Hence the reason why grains and starchy vegetables occupy a smaller portion of the ideal food pyramid. We want to focus on increasing the nutrient density and overall quality of the grains we consume. This means only consuming whole grains, no more processed or refined carbohydrates like white pasta. Organic grains will also be a priority from now on. It's really unfortunate, but most conventional grains are contaminated with modern-day toxins and pollutants. One of the most recognizable forms being glyphosate, which was discovered to be an effective herbicide by a Monsanto scientist in 1970. We've been spraying conventional crops with it ever since, and we have since discovered that glyphosate is a well-known toxin and carcinogen to the human body. Not only that, it is notorious for disrupting our guts by killing off certain beneficial bacteria in the colon. Buying organic grains unfortunately does not ensure that your food will be completely glyphosate-free. At this point, it is in the soil and contaminates many of the tractors and other manufacturing gear used for harvesting and storing grains. So it's really hard to get away from this chemical completely, but you can go a long way in getting it out of the diet by simply switching to locally grown organic produce and grains. Ideally, we also want to focus on consuming only gluten-free grains from now on. Gluten is the main protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. Modern-day gluten has been developed to be a really tough protein, and it's often difficult for the body to break down. In fact, if you make a ball of dough out of all-purpose flour and rinse out the starches through a mesh strainer, what remains is one sticky ball of glue. This glue-like substance is the gluten protein. That is what you are eating, essentially glue. This is troublesome because the digestive tract contains microvilli, or hair-like follicles, that reach up and grab nutrients in the small intestine. When the body doesn't produce enzymes to break down this really heavy gluten protein, the microvilli get trampled by this glue-like substance and they can't absorb nutrients as efficiently. Gluten contributes to inflammation in the body, weight gain, gut problems, and can lead to autoimmune diseases for anyone with a leaky gut. Leaky gut is often both caused by and worsened by inflammatory foods like gluten, stress, caffeine intake, and high fructose corn syrup in the diet. I could talk to you for the whole hour about the negative effects of consuming gluten for most people, but for the sake of time, I'll spare you the deep dive on the subject today. If you're interested in learning more about the effects of gluten on the body, then check out these books on the subject. Wheat Belly by William Davis, MD, and Gluten Freedom by Alessio Fasano, MD. Now that we have a general outline of which kinds of grains we want to keep in the diet and which kinds we want to avoid, let's take a look at some specific examples. Take oats, for example. The picture on the right may just be the kind of oats that you are familiar with. We have rolled oats and instant oats. Basically, these are just the whole oat groat, in the picture on the left, that have been smashed and processed to a greater and lesser degree. The purpose of smashing and flattening this grain is to make it easier for the body to break it down and quickly access the starches, which directly convert to glucose. As you can imagine, the glycemic load for the processed oats is going to be much higher when compared to the oat groats on the left. The lesson here is that if you're going to keep oats in your diet, go for the whole grain. The fiber in this grain has not yet been mechanically manipulated and is still intact. And as we have learned, fiber slows down the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream, leading to a smaller glucose spike after you eat. So choose oat groats over instant oats or rolled oats. When it comes to rice, there are better and worse forms as well. The worst type of rice you can eat is conventionally grown and processed white rice. This is because there's a good chance that it was sprayed with chemical herbicides and pesticides, and the bran and endosperm have been removed to make it more palatable. If you remember, the glycemic index of white rice is around 92 out of 100, so this converts to glucose very quickly once you eat it. Organic brown rice is a better option, as it is likely to be less contaminated by modern toxins, and the grain is still relatively intact, giving it a lower glycemic index when compared to white rice. Wild rice is the best option of these three. It's technically classified as a grass, not a grain. The protein content of wild rice is twice as high when compared to brown rice, and in general it contains more protein, zinc, and potassium than both brown rice and the white rice varieties. Wild rice is also significantly higher in folate and most of the other B vitamins. All of these versions of rice are gluten-free, so if you're going to eat rice, go for organically cultivated wild rice. Now these two carbs don't have a lot in common at all, but I wanted to compare them so that you can understand the difference between conventional, processed forms of carbohydrates versus healthier whole grains. In order to create white flour, which is the base of pasta, the bran and endosperm have to be removed from the grain. So after processing, we are left with pure starch, which, as we know, converts directly to glucose and jacks up the blood sugar. As we have discussed, these blood sugar spikes contribute to faster aging, create more inflammation in the body, and demand that the body generate and use up precious enzymes and nutrient reserves to metabolize the food. For adults, I recommend removing pasta and other processed carbohydrates completely from the diet. Quinoa, on the other hand, is technically not a grain, but a seed. You can even soak it overnight and begin the sprouting process before you cook it. Quinoa is a gluten-free carbohydrate that is also a solid plant-based source of protein. It has a low glycemic index and is packed with fiber, antioxidants, flavonoids, and minerals like iron and magnesium. This is such an easy-to-prepare source of carbohydrates and protein. It is nutrient-rich and mixes well in a stir-fry with beans and veggies. I would recommend adding quinoa to your grocery list if you are looking for healthier forms of carbs to include in your diet. If you like eating cereal, consider switching to a healthier version of what you're used to. On the left, we have a bowl of sprouted buckwheat with some dried fruits, seeds, and almond milk. This is a great breakfast option because raw sprouted buckwheat is a gluten-free grain, which is a good source of plant-based protein, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. On top of that, sprouting the buckwheat brings it to life. You can store dried buckwheat in a bag or in a jar for months, and it just sits there completely unbothered. But once you take it out and soak it in a bowl overnight, it begins to activate growth enzymes in the seed. If you drain the buckwheat and allow it to sit for a couple of days, rinsing it twice a day, you'll notice that it grows a little sprout and transforms into what could one day be a full-grown plant. This is a very nutrient-rich stage of development for a plant, and for that reason, sprouts are considered to be superfoods that everyone should add to the diet. One of the easiest foods to sprout is buckwheat, and considering the fact that it becomes packed with living enzymes and vital nutrients when sprouted, there's no reason not to add this one to the grocery list. Personally, I like to eat my sprouted buckwheat with raw sunflower seeds, organic berries, and fresh homemade almond milk. Now, when it comes to baking, I would highly encourage you to explore some gluten-free flours instead of this all-purpose flour on the right. As you can see, it has been bleached, which makes absolutely no sense. Why would you bleach something that you're going to eat? Well, bleaching is a process that is used to make flour uniformly white, which is somehow more appealing than the yellowish-brown color that flour is in its natural state. Also, by using chemicals, flour producers can get baking quality products out immediately rather than waiting for the grain to age and oxidize naturally. In other words, the bleaching process activates the gluten protein, making it better for fluffy cakes. Peroxides are used as bleaching agents in flour processing. In the United States, the most common flour bleaching agent is benzoyl peroxide. And yes, that is the same benzoyl peroxide that is topically used to treat acne. Several nations, including the European Union, Canada, and China, have banned the use of benzoyl peroxide and other peroxides as food additives because of health concerns. If you're trying to make pancakes, there are better options. In contrast to traditional white all-purpose flour, consider using something like this organic buckwheat flour on the left. It has a much lower glycemic index and is even bleach-free. What a concept!